Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. The card at the top should say something like writing poetry in dark times. I took that from a video by Adam Walker, which I will link to in the description box, as well as any other videos I happen to mention. Adam Walker is a writing teacher at Harvard. If you've seen enough of my videos, you know my view, particularly when it comes to the teaching of writing poetry. There is a spectrum. It can be somewhat useful at one end, and at the other end, it's just an outright con. And mostly it's a useless activity, but it can be helpful sometimes. And I would hope that Mr. Walker is on the helpful end of the spectrum. Be that as it may, this is not going to be about his video, which I would recommend you to for some ideas about where poetry should fit itself in possibly the foreseeable dark times ahead. We know dark times are coming with the climate catastrophe which looms. As far as, say, the political situation in the United States, many voices have prognosticated really dark times for our citizenry, or as the would-be overlords would have it, there would be peonage, I guess. But I don't care to speculate on that situation here. As far as the question in the card, poetry, writing poetry in dark times, my question would be, what do you mean by dark times? It's a good thing to think about. As far as writing poetry, my answer would be, if indeed one finds him or herself in truly dark times, it would probably be best to engage oneself in dealing with that. So we can possibly see in the immediate future some problems with the food supply. So it would be worth one's while to think about that and to take action towards trying to have some kind of means of dealing with a situation, a food crisis type of situation when it arises. It's, of course, impossible to predict this sort of thing. At the time of the World Trade Towers falling down, a lot of people thought it was the end of the world. All these years later, that was what, 2001, all these years later, we realized that it was just an incident. It was something that happened. Of course, the actions that were taken in response to it altered the political landscape and also the psychological landscape of this country immensely. But I remember everybody was putting pressure on Billy Collins, who I believe was poet laureate at the time. You've got to write about that, Billy. And Billy said, no, there's just no way. I am not going to touch it. And then I think about a year later, he did write a poem. He succumbed to the pressure, wrote a poem about what happened on that day, and it was a very finely done piece. But I think that anything that he would have written should have arisen spontaneously. And as a matter of fact, people did find the solace in poetry that they seemed to need in a poem written by W.H. Auden. And this video is going to be primarily a reading of poetry by W.H. Auden. It was not an exact fit to the situation, but it was close enough. And I think that when one finds oneself in dire situations or a dire situation, one can find the poetry that one needs. And it's interesting that that poem was found because it was a poem that Auden himself excluded from his collected poems. I have here his collected shorter poems. Now, as an aside, back to the Adam Walker video, which, as I say, I'm not going to touch upon here. I watched it some days ago, and without watching it again, I've been thinking about it, and maybe I will rewatch it and talk about it in a future video. I've been thinking a lot about Auden since a couple of days ago, booktuber Joshua Kribo did a poetry reading in which he read a poem by Auden, one of my favorite poems by Auden. And I've been a little bit distracted lately. I fall into these modes of watching YouTube videos about the current political crisis. I would not say we have entered into dark times as yet, but nevertheless, it absorbs the attention. And I have found that it's hard to wrench myself from that fixation, and I thought that a little bit of poetry might help. I was initially thinking to do a reading of poems by W.H. Auden and W.B. Yeats, but I've decided there's so much good stuff here that I will stick to Auden. And Auden is a poet that I really have not spent a lot of time with. But I've just sort of pulled through this and will read a nice handful of poems. In some cases, not always the most flawless, but in all cases, I think, very memorable poems, at least for me. The first one is titled Taller Today. Taller today, we remember similar evenings, walking together in a windless orchard where the brook runs over the gravel far from the glacier. Nights come bringing the snow and the dead howl under headlands in their windy dwelling because the adversary put too easy questions on lonely roads. But happy now, though no nearer each other, we see farms lighted all along the valley. Down at the mill shed, hammering stops, and men go home. Noises at dawn will bring freedom for some, but not this peace no bird can contradict. Passing but here, sufficient now for something fulfilled this hour, loved or endured. This one is sometimes known by a part from its first line, "Oh, where are you going?" "Oh, where are you going?" said reader to rider. "That valley is fatal when furnaces burn. Yonder's the midden whose odors will madden. That gap is the grave where the tall return." "Oh, do you imagine," said fearer to farer, "that dusk will delay on your path to the pass? Your diligent looking discover the lacking, your footsteps feel from granite to grass. Oh, what was that bird? Said horror to hearer. Did you see that shape in the twisted trees? Behind you, swiftly, the figure comes softly. The spot on your skin is a shocking disease. Out of this house, said rider to reader. Yours never will, said farer to fearer. They're looking for you, said hearer to horror, as he left them there, as he left them there. I'm trying not to flub up, but I haven't read these for a long time. So this is the one that Joshua read, and I mentioned to him there is a very lovely reading of this poem done by the poet Dylan Thomas. As I walked out one evening. As I walked out one evening, walking down Bristol Street, the crowds upon the pavement were fields of harvest wheat. And down by the brimming river, I heard a lover sing, under an arch of the railway, love has no ending. I'll love you, dear, I'll love you, till China and Africa meet, and the river jumps over the mountain, and the salmon sing in the street. I'll love you till the ocean is folded and hung up to dry, and the 7 stars go squawking like geese about the sky. The years shall run like rabbits, for in my arms I hold the flower of the ages and the first love of the world. But all the clocks in the city began to whir and chime. Oh, let not time deceive you, you cannot conquer time. In the burrows of the nightmare, where justice naked is, time watches from the shadow and coughs when you would kiss. In headaches and in worry, vaguely life leaks away, and time will have his fancy tomorrow or today. Into many a green valley drifts the appalling snow. Time breaks the threaded dances and the diver's brilliant bow. Oh, plunge your hands in water, plunge them in up to the wrist. Stare, stare in the basin and wonder what you've missed. The glacier knocks in the cupboard, the desert sighs in the bed, and the crack in the teacup opens a lane to the land of the dead, where the beggars raffle the banknotes and the giant is enchanting to Jack, and the lily-white boy is Aurora, and Jill goes down on her back. Oh, look, look in the mirror. Oh, look in your distress. Life remains a blessing, although you cannot bless. Oh, stand, stand at the window as the tears scald and start. You shall love your crooked neighbor with your crooked heart. It was late, late in the evening. The lovers, they were gone. The clocks had ceased their chiming, and the deep river ran on. So I will put a link to Dylan Thomas's reading of that in the description box. This one, I'm not sure if it has a title. At least in this, it does not. It's in a collection of songs, as he calls them, and this is number 9. Stop all the clocks, cut off the telephone, prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone, silence the pianos, and with muffled drum, bring out the coffin, let the mourners come. Let aeroplanes circle, moaning overhead, scribbling on the sky the message, he is dead. Put crepe bows round the white necks of the public doves. Let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves. He was my north, my south, my east and west, my working week and my Sunday rest, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. The stars are not wanted now. Put out every one. Pack up the moon and dismantle the sun. Pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood, for nothing now can ever come to any good. The next one, I'll just read the first stanza from. I don't particularly like this poem, but it's very, very memorable. At least the first part is. I should spend more time with it. It's titled Lullaby. Lay your sleeping head, my love, human on my faithless arm. Time and fevers burn away individual beauty from thoughtful children, and the grave proves the child ephemeral. But in my arms till break of day, let the living creature lie, mortal, guilty, but to me, the entirely beautiful. I'll just go on with it. Soul and body have no bounds to lovers as they lie upon her tolerant enchanted slope in their ordinary swoon. Grave the vision Venus sends of supernatural sympathy, universal love and hope, while an abstract insight wakes among the glaciers and the rocks, the hermit's carnal ecstasy. Certainty, fidelity on the stroke of midnight pass, like vibrations of a bell, and fashionable madmen raise their pedantic, boring cry. Every farthing of the cost, all the dreaded cards foretell, shall be paid, but from this night not a whisper, not a thought, not a kiss, nor look be lost. Beauty, midnight, vision dies. Let the winds of dawn that blow softly round your dreaming head such a day of welcome show, eye and knocking heart may bless. Find our mortal world enough, noons of dryness find you fed by the involuntary powers, nights of insult let you pass, watched by every human love. It's interesting that 3 of the poems so far have had the word glacier, which Dylan Thomas pronounces glacier, and I would suppose perhaps Auden did himself. This is that most famous poem, Musée des Beaux-Arts. About suffering, they were never wrong, the old masters. How well they understood its human position, how it takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. How, when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth, there always must be children who did not specially want it to happen, skating on a pond at the edge of the wood. They never forgot that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course anyhow in a corner, some untidy spot where the dogs go on with their doggy life and the torturer's horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. In Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. The plowman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry, but for him it was not an important failure. The sun shone as it had to on the white legs disappearing into the green water, and the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on. This one should hold a lot of meaning for us, titled Epitaph on a Tyrant. Perfection of a kind was what he was after, and the poetry he invented was easy to understand. He knew human folly like the back of his hand, and was greatly interested in armies and fleets. When he laughed, respectable senators burst with laughter, and when he cried, the little children died in the streets. Possibly a portent of where our would-be tyrants would have us going. Now, the next one in the book is the memory of W.B. Yeats, and it was a poem that he whittled down, and so I have another source for that one. I will get to that in a moment. This next one that I will read is titled The Unknown Citizen. To JS 07M 378, this marble monument is erected by the state. He was found by the Bureau of Statistics to be one against whom there was no official complaint, and all the reports on his conduct agree that in the modern sense of an old-fashioned word, he was a saint, for in everything he did, he served the greater community. Except for the war, till the day he retired, he worked in a factory and never got fired, but satisfied his employers, Fudge Motors, Inc. Yet he wasn't a scab or odd in his views, for his union reports that he paid his dues. Our report on his union shows it was sound, and our social psychology workers found that he was popular with his mates and liked a drink. The press are convinced that he bought a paper every day and that his reactions to advertisements were normal in every way. Policies taken out in his name prove that he was fully insured, and his health card shows he was once in hospital but left it cured. Both producers, research, and high-grade living declare he was fully sensible to the advantages of the installment plan and had everything necessary to the modern man: a photograph, a radio, a car, and a Frigidaire. Our researchers into public opinion are content that he held the proper opinions for the time of year. When there was peace, he was for peace. When there was war, he went. He was married and added 5 children to the population, which our eugenist says was the right number for a parent of his generation. And our teachers report that he never interfered with their education. Was he free? Was he happy? The question is absurd. Had anything been wrong, we should certainly have heard. I don't think I've done many freestanding readings of this on my channel, I don't even think I've put up a W.H. Auden playlist of any sort. And this next one, it's another one that I don't particularly love, but it's very, very memorable. At least it has been so for me. Law like love. Law, say the gardeners, is the sun. Law is the one all gardeners obey. Tomorrow, yesterday, today. Law is the wisdom of the old. The impotent grandfathers feebly scold. The grandchildren put out a treble tongue. Law is the senses of the young. Law, says the priest with a priestly look, expounding to an unpriestly people. Law is the words in my priestly book. Law is my pulpit and my steeple. Law, says the judge as he looks down his nose, speaking clearly and most severely. Law is as I've told you before. Law is as you know, I suppose. Law is, but let me explain it once more. Law is the law. Yet law-abiding scholars write, law is neither wrong nor right. Law is only crimes punished by places and by times. Law is the clothes men wear anytime, anywhere. Law is good morning and good night. Others say, law is our fate. Others say, law is our state. Others say, law is no more. Law has gone away. And always the loud, angry crowd, very angry and very loud. Law is we, and always the soft idiot, softly me. If we, dear, know we know no more than they about the law, if I, no more than you, know what we should and should not do, except that all agree, gladly or miserably, that the law is, and that all know this. If therefore, thinking it absurd to identify law with some other word, unlike so many men, I cannot say law is again. No more than they can we suppress the universal wish to guess, or slip out of our own position into an unconcerned condition. Although I can at least confine your vanity and mine to stating timidly a timid similarity, we shall boast anyway. Like love, I say. Like love, we don't know where or why. Like love, we can't compel or fly. Like love, we often weep. Like love, we seldom keep. That must be the last that I picked out from this book. They are sequential chronologically. So I will read September 1, 1939. This is the poem which the public glommed onto after the felling of the World Trade Center towers in 2001. The book that Auden excluded from his collected poems. There is a very nice essay written by Sven Burkertz, possibly the best thing he ever wrote, touching upon the poem and touching upon the events and touching upon the place of poetry in dealing with such like events. I did a video about it and I will link that. September 1, 1939. I sit in one of the dives on 52nd Street, uncertain and afraid, as the clever hopes expire of a low, dishonest decade. Waves of anger and fear circulate over the bright and darkened lands of the earth, obsessing our private lives. The unmentionable odor of death offends the September night. Accurate scholarship can unearth the whole offense from Luther until now that has driven a culture mad. Find what occurred at Linz, what huge imago made a psychopathic God. I and the public know what all school children learn. Those to whom evil is done do evil in return. Exiled Thucydides knew all that a speech can say about democracy and what dictators do. The elderly rubbish they talk to an apathetic grave. Analyzed all in his book, the enlightenment driven away, the habit-forming pain, mismanagement, and grief. We must suffer them all again. Into this neutral air, where blind skyscrapers use their full height to proclaim the strength of collective man. Each language pours its vain, competitive excuse. But who can live for long in an euphoric dream? Out of the mirror they stare, imperialism's face and the international wrong. Faces along the bar cling to their average day. The lights must never go out. The music must always play. All the conventions conspire to make this fort assume the furniture of home, lest we should see where we are, lost in a haunted wood, children afraid of the night, who have never been happy or good. The windiest militant trash important persons shout is not so crude as our wish. What Mad Nijinsky wrote about Daliev is true of the normal heart, for the error bred in the bone of each woman and each man craves what it cannot have, not universal love, but to be loved alone. From the conservative dark into the ethical life, the dense commuters come, repeating their morning vow. I will be true to the wife. I'll concentrate more on my work. And helpless governors wake to resume their compulsory game. Who can release them now? Who can reach the deaf? Who can speak for the dumb? All I have is a voice to undo the folded lie, the romantic lie in the brain of the sensual man in the street, and the lie of authority whose buildings grope the sky. There is no such thing as the state, and no one exists alone. Hunger allows no choice to the citizen or the police. We must love one another or die. Defenseless under the night, our world in stupor lies, yet dotted everywhere, ironic points of light flash out wherever the just exchange their messages. May I, composed like them, of arrows and of dust, beleaguered by the same negation and despair, show an affirming flame. Written in 1940. I suppose one would say written during a dark time. Very well said. In his video, Joshua lamented almost that he's read so little of these different books of poetry, and expressed the thought that he needs to get there. And I would counter that. I think this, and then with the poem with which I will close, you have got pretty much the best of Auden. One does not need to read all poetry. One may well rest contented with the best. That is how poetry functions. I've mentioned oft upon this channel, In a Dark Time, I discovered that poem by Emily Dickinson, and it saved me, and that poem was what I needed at that moment. If one finds oneself in a dark time, if you look about, you may well find the poem that will help you. That may be the only one poem that you need to read in your entire life. Who can say? So, the last poem that I will read is the epitaph for William Butler Yeats. It was, Auden whittled down his poems, he edited them, he canceled lines. As I say, he canceled that entire poem about September 1, 1939, because he felt it was untrue. Posterity disputes him. One is reminded of Marianne Moore cutting off everything from her famous poem, Poetry, I Too Dislike It. How does it go? But in it one can find a place for the genuine, something like that. Full stop for her, end of poem. But of course, the poem has lingered because of all those lines which follow. I think this poem is divided into sections, 3 sections as I recall, yeah. And it was primarily the third section that he cut down. I think he cut it down a couple times. I think in the final version, it's just 1 stanza. Most places now will print it with 6 stanzas in that third part. And I think oftentimes they will print a composite version. So they'll pick the first part from one and the second, I think this must be the very first one. And so that third section is the longest, and it may not be the best version of it by any means, but it is the version that I love the most. The part that I'm talking about, you will hear there is certainly some echo of William Blake, and maybe Auden was displeased at that. I don't know. But so William Butler Yeats died in January of 1939, and I will just read that poem. So we went from, he died in January, and in September, Auden wrote that other poem. So this one, I think it says it was written in let's see. Oh, it doesn't say when it was written. It's all right. So, in memory of W.B. Yeats, died January 1939, 1. He disappeared in the dead of winter. The brooks were frozen, the airports almost deserted, and snow disfigured the public statues. The mercury sank in the mouth of the dying day. Oh, all the instruments. I'll start that one again, sorry. In memory of W.B. Yeats, died January 1939, 1. He disappeared in the dead of winter. The brooks were frozen, the airports almost deserted, and snow disfigured the public statues. The mercury sank in the mouth of the dying day. Oh, all the instruments I keep blowing it. Let's see, why am I doing that? Let me see, I might do a composite. Let's see what I have here. If I can find him now. No, he's got to be after. Up there we go. Oh, I didn't read this one. Well, I'll read that one last. Then I will add a poem. I'm still looking for the one about Yeats. Okay, here it is. Yeah. I'll read the first two parts from here and then the last part from the other. In memory of W.B. Yeats, 1. He disappeared in the dead of winter. The brooks were frozen, the airports almost deserted, and snow disfigured the public statues. The mercury sank in the mouth of the dying day. What instruments we have agree, the day of his death was a dark, cold day. Far from his illness, the wolves ran on through the evergreen forests. The peasant river was untempted by the fashionable quays. By mourning tongues, the death of the poet was kept from his poems. But for him, it was his last afternoon as himself, an afternoon of nurses and rumors. The provinces of his body revolted. The squares of his mind were empty. Silence invaded the suburbs. The current of his feeling failed. He became his admirers. Now he is scattered among 100 cities and wholly given over to unfamiliar affections, to find his happiness in another kind of wood and be punished under a foreign code of conscience. The words of a dead man are modified in the guts of the living. But in the importance and noise of tomorrow, when the brokers are roaring like beasts on the floor of the bourse, and the poor have the sufferings to which they are fairly accustomed, and each in the cell of himself is almost convinced of his freedom, a few thousand will think of this day as one thinks of a day when one did something slightly unusual. What instruments we have agree, the day of his death was a dark, cold day. You were silly like us. Your gift survived it all. The parish of rich women, physical decay, yourself. Mad Ireland hurt you into poetry. Now Ireland has her madness and her weather still. For poetry makes nothing happen. It survives in the valley of its making, where executives would never want to tamper. Flows on south from ranches of isolation and the busy griefs, raw towns that we believe and die in. It survives, a way of happening, a mouth. Earth, receive an honored guest. William Yeats is laid to rest. Let the Irish vessel lie, emptied of its poetry. Time that is intolerant of the brave and innocent, and indifferent in a week to a beautiful physique, worships language and forgives everyone by whom it lives, pardons cowardice, conceit, lays its honors at their feet. Time that with this strange excuse pardoned Kipling and his views, and will pardon Paul Claudel, pardons him for writing well. In the nightmare of the dark, all the dogs of Europe bark, and the living nations wait, each sequestered in its hate. Intellectual disgrace stares from every human face, and the seas of pity lie locked and frozen in each eye. Follow, poet, follow, right, to the bottom of the night. With your unconstraining voice, still persuade us to rejoice. With the farming of a verse, make a vineyard of the curse. Sing of human unsuccess in a rapture of distress. In the deserts of the heart, let the healing fountain start. In the prison of his days, teach the free man how to praise. I think he canceled it down to just that first stanza. Earth, receive an honored guest. William Yeats is laid to rest. Let the Irish vessel lie, emptied of its poetry. As I say, nobody prints that one. They all print the one with the 6. I love the full extent of the third part, even though it may not be as good as the one that gets commonly printed. I just want to look back at the second part for a second. The first line, you were, let's see if it's the same. Let me go back to this one. You were silly like us. Your gift survived it all. The perish of rich women, physical decay, yourself. I can recall hearing somebody go on a rant about that first line, you were silly like us. William Butler Yeats was not a silly man, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember who it was doing that rant, but you didn't get the line, let's say. And then there's another part that is very famous for poetry makes nothing happen. Everybody talks about that. I think somewhere, and it could even be that video that I mentioned at the top. Recently, somebody was saying poetry makes things happen. I think, I mean, in the odd instance, it may well make something happen, but as a rule, no, it does not. It does not make anything happen. And now I just, now I have to find that one. When I was young, my sister had a textbook, and I don't know how old I was. I was in junior high, probably 7th grade. Now, it was in 6th grade that I first encountered the muse. I have a video about my relationship with the muse. It happened in 6th grade. So I was, 11 years old at the time. I didn't know what happened to me, didn't know where it was leading me. And in 7th grade, I was poking around through a textbook of my sister's. So I think she would have been in high school by this point. And I found this poem, and it was given the title of The Quarry. And that is how it is reprinted in this book. I've seen it elsewhere, just given with no title. At the time, I had no understanding of the title. In fact, it took me many, many years to understand what was meant by the quarry. I grew up in a town that had a big, huge quarry, which to this day is digging up all kinds of minerals or rocks. The quarry. Oh, what is that sound which so thrills the ear? Down in the valley, drumming, drumming. Only the scarlet soldiers, dear, the soldiers coming. Oh, what is that light I see flashing so clear? Over the distance, brightly, brightly. Only the sun on their weapons, dear, as they step lightly. Oh, what are they doing with all that gear? What are they doing this morning, this morning? Only their usual maneuvers, dear, or perhaps a warning. Oh, why have they left the road down there? Why are they suddenly wheeling, wheeling? Perhaps a change in their orders, dear. Why are you kneeling? Oh, haven't they stopped for the doctor's care? Haven't they reined their horses, their horses? Why, they are none of them wounded, dear, none of these forces. Oh, is it the parson they want with white hair? Is it the parson? Is it? No, they are passing his gateway, dear, without a visit. Oh, it must be the farmer who lives so near. It must be the farmer so cunning, so cunning. They have passed the farmyard already, dear, and now they are running. Oh, where are you going? Stay with me here. Were the vows you swore deceiving, deceiving? No, I promised to love you, dear, but I must be leaving. Oh, it's broken the lock and splintered the door. Oh, it's the gate where they're turning, turning. Their boots are heavy on the floor, and their eyes are burning. So, 1936. Was Auden in Germany? I know he spoke German and after the war did war service over there. He must have been acutely aware of what was going on in Germany. I mean, those lines resonate already here in the US. I mean, there have been videos of very appropriate application already of persons being corralled up and hauled away that initially thought that it would be other persons receiving the treatment. So I will leave off here. I perhaps will spend more time with my books or book of Auden. He is definitely a poet who I love dearly with a singularity, meaning 4 specific poems. There's many other poems that I don't look at, and perhaps I should do something of that in the days to come. He obviously knew a lot about dark times, let us say. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.